I always ask before we start recording, like, do you record a trigger warning before, or do I say trigger warning? I was, from as early as I can remember, molested by my dad, and I was raped by his father, my grandfather, when I was 7 years old. They were also really quite dangerous men. I was threatened to be killed quite often. I was tortured. The most sadistic, awful abuse was my childhood. It's not really about all of those little details. For me, the story is no matter what happens to you, you can heal, because who I am today and who I am sitting here now is a completely different version to the version of myself that I was for the first probably 30 years of life.
Do we have any idea as to how many people have experienced something similar to you?
In Australia, it's a massive problem. 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 5 boys will be sexually abused in their childhood. Of those, 90% of them are from a family member. So it's actually not really stranger danger at all. Part of the problem is that because they are people that we know, trust and love, we're very unlikely to disclose the abuse. I think the average for women is like 25 years after, and men it's like never actually disclosed. It's something that people are carrying, and they're ending up in psych wards, suicidal, in hospitals, in constant therapy with drug addictions. They just have no idea how to cope with it. And there's other problems that we think are a different problem that actually come back to this sexual abuse.
It's not until being an adult that I had the awareness of how common that it is. I can't imagine what that's like to actually reconcile, because you're not dealing with someone that's well in their right mind in the first place. How do you even start to unpack that? Why does someone do that? Probably because it happened to them.
My personal opinion and experience, for everybody that's doing it, they've experienced it. There's a number of different ways that it happens. Their brain either thinks, well, this is what happened to me, so I'm going to continue that. Or they have these impulses and these urges that they take very seriously, and they act on them because they've not developed parts of the brain to be able to have impulse control and things like that. But then there's also a number of people who think that they're actually doing the child a favor. There's a number of different reasons how mentally it can feel like a normal decision or a right decision. But it's not even like consciously sometimes that they're doing that. Their brain's unconsciously just doing that. This is how it gets passed down. If they're not actually aware that it's wrong, they're not dealing with that trauma, the shame that they're carrying, the reason why they're having the intrusive thoughts, all of that, then it just keeps rippling through generations.
Right. But obviously it makes perfect sense in terms of how your own healing has put you in a position to help others. At what point did you feel that you could start to do that? Like, tell me about how that came to be.
Yeah, I think it took a little while for me to be able to like specialize in and work with women/people with sexual abuse. It took really me facing everything first.
And even talking about that, like the first time that you shared that?
The first time I was like, I'm going to share my life story. I remember I posted it and then I deleted it straight away. And then I was like shaking, and then I'm like, nope, I'm going to do it.
Yes.
Posted it and just got rid of my phone, and woke up the next day and there was a massive fear of hate and of people not believing me and all of those things. And I just woke up to like 500 amazing, beautiful, kind, supportive messages, which is amazing. But yeah, I had to do a lot of work. I had to do subconscious work, somatic work. There was a grieving process because I loved my father deeply. I was attached to him, trauma bonded to him, but I also loved him in a way that you would love a father. I don't really know what natural love for a father is, to be honest, but cutting him out of my life and then grieving him, and it was a whole heap of layers.
Can you heal and have that person in your life?
Naturally, you probably wouldn't want someone in your life who had done that to you. But as I always say to people, it depends on context. Because, for instance, I know somebody personally, her father had done it to her. Only once, even once is not okay, obviously. From that occasion, like when she had confronted him about it, he apologized and broke down, and he was ashamed, and he said that he would get help. And, you know, there was a perspective of wanting to repair. There was this acceptance of it. And I feel like if the person is willing to take their part and they're willing to accept what they've done, then you can forgive and move forward. In my case, that was never going to be the case. So there's a scale as well. A police officer once saying to me, there's men who they're not bad people, they're just idiots, they do bad things. Then there's people who are bad to the bone. And unfortunately, your dad's one of those people.
In my experience as a practitioner, I see a lot of women who have had various forms of trauma, whatever it might be, and how that manifests in the body physically. And I just don't ever see them getting better until that person is gone.
It felt like, and I know that there is scientific evidence, but it felt like I couldn't even absorb the nutrients that I was eating because I was in such a state. You don't know how to be treated any other way, but you also see that as what feels familiar and normal. So
trauma is interesting because obviously it's the perception of the person.
I just had this conversation this morning because we were talking about child-on-child trauma, sexual abuse versus other things. And we were talking about how there is this perception that like all trauma is just trauma. I have this like split down the middle because on one side, I'm like, well, yeah, the way that I heal a trauma, whether you've been bullied at school or whether you've been brutally raped or whatever it is, the process is the same. So trauma is the same. But on the other hand, the frequency of trauma is really important. A couple of isolated incidents versus being abused every single day of your life is completely different. One of them are stored as individual events, as individual traumatic events, but the complex kind of ongoing abuse, it actually just becomes who you are. And it's really difficult then for someone to separate between what happened and who they are. So it becomes their identity. And then also the scale, like having a bully in school, say a friend's playing and they're like, we don't want to play with you today, right? Like that's a common trauma because the child might think, no one likes me, no one wants to play with me. What the brain has to do to survive that is very different to what the brain has to do to survive child rape or something that is like overwhelming. The level of dissociation to have to leave your body essentially in those intensely traumatic experiences, that does different things to the brain. That is stored differently. It's coped with differently. Sometimes it's completely repressed and it's unconscious. And then you spend your whole life wondering what's wrong with me because you've had to fully block this thing out. Whereas that doesn't happen with some of those, like we'll call it smaller T traumas, but the process to healing it is the same.
I can see that some people, even though it's not the same, would have the same response almost and replay something over and over and over in their head.
Yes.
So I guess it's not an easy question to answer, but
it also depends on their protective factors. So if you have two children who are being abused by a parent, it doesn't even have to be like verbally abused, alcoholic parents, drug addict parents, these are common scenarios that I work with domestic violence, but those two children go to school and one child is being bullied every day at school as well. They've got no friends, but the other child has a really good friendship group. They've got a great basketball coach and this teacher that they really love. Those are protective factors. Now, the trajectory of those two different children's lives is most likely going to be completely different because one child had no protective factors and one child actually had outlets where they were able to feel loved and accepted, and they might have even been able to speak about what's happening at home or just felt safe. If a child has no safe place, the trajectory of their life is going to be very different to the other one that was going to school. So those protective factors also make a big difference in their ability to actually process, even if they don't verbalize it, what they're experiencing. Again, like small things like that, people underestimate the power of like a really good primary school teacher that it just feels safe and warm and loving. Like that could actually be so healing and impact a child's entire life.
If this conversation has brought up feelings for you, please reach out for support. In Australia, you can contact Lifeline on 131114 or visit lifeline.org.au. If you're listening from somewhere else, please connect with a trusted support service in your local area.